Hey everybody, before I get started, I just want to mention a couple of ways that you can engage with me on a more personal level. I have a few avenues set up and I keep focusing on one, and I figured why don't I make a short little video talking about all of them real quick before we get into these episodes. So first thing, Patreon. There's a link in the episode description and every episode description to the Patreon, as well as a video on the feed called Major Announcement that has all the details of what each tier offers and how much they cost. I implore you to check that out. I offer a lot of cool shit for my patrons. Second thing, the Discord channel. There's also a Discord link in the episode description and in every episode description. I have multiple channels set up there for each show that I'm covering, and it's a great way to just engage with me. I have a channel set up for MMA talk as well. I'm a big MMA fan, so if you're an MMA fan, you can check that out as well. There's a link to the Discord in the episode description. And then lastly, the Facebook and Twitter. Social media. Follow me on there. I post news on there. When I say news, I mean like, hey, I'm stopping covering this show. Hey, I'm starting covering this show. Let me know what you think about this. I do live watches of things on Facebook where like I'll check in and say I'm watching so-and-so show, and then I'll like live comment while I'm watching it, and that'll be cool if maybe you watch that show too and you want to watch along with me, or you're watching it later and you will see my thoughts, which are usually pretty entertaining because I'm usually pretty high when I'm writing them. So check out all those links in each episode description, and let's talk about this episode. Peace.
One mic, one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. One mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. One mic. One mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about Season 1, Episode 5 of HBO's The Last of Us, entitled Endure and Survive. The episode title is based on a phrase that we hear uttered multiple times throughout this episode. It's from the Savage Starlight comic book that Ellie and Sam share some bonding moments over throughout this episode. It was actually, this was a very predictable episode title. If you don't pay attention to episode titles like I do, which I feel like is probably everyone, if you go on HBO, they did this with Game of Thrones toward the end of its run. They did it with House of the Dragon during its entire run, and they're doing it with this show. When the episode first drops, they don't have the episode title, they don't have a description. They usually don't update that until a little bit after the episode. And when I'm watching it, they said Endure and Survive so many times, I look at my wife, I'm like, that's going to be episode title. And sure enough, it was. But enough about the episode title. Let's talk about this episode. And I thought this episode was fucking fantastic. And I'm not going to go into the this is what happened. I mean, I don't do that a lot anyway, but even less so am I going to be like, okay, this is what happened in this episode. We all fucking saw it, right? What I want to do is I want to talk about why I thought this episode was so effective. And I think this is, I'm not going to do this a lot in this video, but I'm going to draw a couple of parallels because I think it's going to help me kind of like explain why I thought this episode was so effective. And I think it's important because, I talk about these kind of things a lot, but usually through the lens of like not this show, but a different show. I might be talking about a different show. This show did this thing wrong, or this wasn't as effective because they didn't do this, they didn't do that. And very rarely do I get an opportunity to be like, point at this, and this are all the reasons why this episode was so effective. You don't get this too often where a show executes on everything so perfectly to achieve a very earned emotional response at the end. You don't see it too often, and I really want to focus on what they did so good here, because this is the kind of thing that puts this show above all the other kind of shows. Even the shows that you think are great, they're not doing shit this good and this effective. And this is how you get how you move a good show into a great show. And not doing these kind of things is how a good show becomes a shitty one. And I'm gonna do a couple of comparisons, I think, between this and like Mayfair Witches, which I don't want to say I'm not trying to shit on Mayfair Witches, because I clearly am, but like it's not from a place of like I'm trying to be mean to this show, but I just think these two episodes work so well for comparison's sake, because Mayfair Witches was a great example of how you do a lot of shit wrong, and this was the perfect example of how you do everything perfectly. So like I just want to focus on why this episode was so effective to me, and why it was probably effective to you guys, but you probably don't sit there and think, you probably don't know like why did this episode fucking wreck me? And I want to talk about what they did good in this episode that made it so that by the time we got to the end, we were probably all just sitting there like, fucking hey man, what a depressing fucking depressed piece of shit I am right now. So the first thing I want to talk about is the earned emotional responses that this show elicits. That this episode elicited from the actors. So after this episode, I found myself wondering why this show has now twice, this episode and the Bill and Frank episode, why this show has now done twice what movies struggle to do in their entire runtime, what other TV shows struggle to do in their entire seasons, which is build, showcase, and then, I don't want to say destroy, but like essentially show the entire progress of someone's relationship to where by the time it gets to the end, by the time we get to the culmination of these people's relationship, we're so invested that when it ends, it's really effective for us, and they earn an emotional response from us. And it's so hard to get these like believable relationships done in 2 hours, 3 hours, 8 hours. It's hard to do that kind of shit. And this show has now done it twice within a self-contained episode, like just within one episode. Like, we didn't meet Henry and Sam in this episode technically, but I mean, we really kind of did. Like, we laid eyes on them at the end of the last episode, and that's it. But like, you know, now Henry and Sam's entire story was contained in this episode, and it was fucking phenomenal. And Bill and Frank's whole relationship was contained in one episode. It was fucking phenomenal, and they were able to show the entire life of this relationship with Bill and Frank, and then they were able to build up enough of oh man, there's a term I want to use that I think explains this perfectly what they did, but like emotional kind of like I don't know, there's a term, but kind of like imagine like a bag that's full of emotions. I don't fucking know, but like they filled up this bag or this jug or whatever it is with this emotion and all of this and things that can make you invested, like reasons about like why you should feel some sort of emotional connection to these characters. They filled up this bag or this jug, whatever you want to call it, with reasons to why you would be emotional. So that way when it happens, you got all of this baggage surrounding these characters and all that they've dealt with, you understand, so that when these things that happen at the end of this episode happen, they hit way harder. And this show has done that twice, and most shows can't do it. Most shows can't do it in a whole season. And it made me wonder, how do they do this so effectively in 1 hour that they've done it now twice? And I think it starts and ends with both the actors and the director. And I think the actors in that you need, it's not going to work if the actors can't make it believable. And in this case, you had two kids. Like, well, Sam is very literally a kid, but Henry looked like he might be kind of young. He might not be a kid, but he might be like, I don't know, like in real life, maybe like in his early 20s, but playing like an 18-year-old or 17-year-old on this. And, you know, that's going to be even harder, right? To get, you know, less seasoned actors to be able to do the kind of work that they need to do in order to elicit these responses. And I think that's why where the director comes into play, where the director is probably really coaching these two, the actors that played Henry and Sam, really coaching them on like, this is what you need to do in order to explain blank to the audience. Because in order for us to feel devastated by the events at the end of the episode, we have to have an emotional connection to Henry and Sam. So the director needs to be coaching these actors like, okay, the goal here is for the audience to be invested in you, Henry, as a big brother to Sam, and Sam, you as a little brother who needs protecting from his big brother, and two brothers who would do anything for each other, who would kill for each other, who love each other. Like, we need to get that across to the audience, so that way they're gonna get fucked up when they get to the end of the episode and they see what happens. And I want to give an example on how they did this. And you guys aren't, if you didn't see the most recent episode of Mayfair, which technically hasn't even aired yet, but I'm gonna use that to kind of compare what that show does with what this show did. So in the latest episode of Mayfair Witches, there's a scene where Alexandra Daddario is essentially possessed. And it looks like they kind of the scene kind of plays like she read a script and was like, okay, these are the words that I have to chant. I'm supposed to be playing somebody who's possessed. And then we see whatever it is that she decided she was going to do with that. The thing that made that even worse for her, because it didn't come off very good at all, was that we saw a different actress do the exact same thing 10 million times better, like 2 scenes prior, right? So when we see Alexandra Daddario doing it, it doesn't work. It doesn't come off very believable. And like I said, it felt like she just kind of like read off the paper or something like that. Like, but with this, it felt like the director probably gave Henry and Sam way more direction and really stressed the importance of getting us invested in Henry and Sam's relationship. Like, it didn't feel like those two were given lines and were reading them off a paper and just kind of like, okay, this is what I have to do, and just kind of winging it. It felt like they were being given really strong direction. Like they were being told, like they were explicitly told, in order for this episode to work, the audience needs to be on your side. You need to be sympathetic to them. They need to understand how much Henry loves his brother. They need to understand how vulnerable Sam is, how much he needs him. They need to be worried for you because they don't want to see two good kids get hurt. Like, all of these things that they're probably explaining to these actors, like, these are the things you need to keep in mind when you two are interacting, because you need to sell the audience on this relationship so that way we can really kick them in the fucking teeth at the end, right? So you see the creation of like their whole superhero dynamic. You see Henry having to be strong for his brother, even though we know that he really is scared. You know, but he has to tell him, do I look scared to you? You know, that kind of stuff. We see Henry having to be uber responsible, you know, managing the food, even though Sam's complaining like, I'm hungry. He's like, we got to wait for Edelstein to get back. You know, Henry having to make these hard decisions, you know, having to be way more grown than he's emotionally prepared to be. Like, these are things that we can all relate to as humans, as kids, as parents, whatever, right? And then they do what I thought was a masterstroke, pause, by having, apparently Sam's not deaf in the game. And they decided to make Sam deaf in the show. And in the after show, they talked about that he wasn't deaf. And I liked in the game, and the idea was that it would make it so that Sam was even more reliant on Henry for protection, which they don't say this, but then that of course now makes us more worried for Sam, because we look at it like he's more vulnerable, he needs Henry more, and then like a kid in this situation is gonna be sympathetic. A kid who can't hear is gonna be even more sympathetic. And they don't say that, and I don't blame them. They didn't say like making Sam deaf was gonna make him more sympathetic, because that makes it look like they pity deaf people. So like, I know why they didn't say that, but 1,000% that was also a factor. Like, it also does make it so that he's more reliant on Henry, and then thus more we're more concerned about him. So it works from that perspective, but it also works because if he can't hear, he's just more prone to getting fucked up. He's not gonna hear things coming. So now he's reliant, but at the same time, even if he wasn't as reliant, if he was like a fucking if he was like opposite Daredevil or some shit, like I can't hear, but I can see really fucking good. I can see through walls or some shit like that. Even if that was the case, it's still the fact that he's a kid who can't hear. You'd be like, oh man, because nobody wants to see any kind of kid having to deal with anything like that. So like, it made the character more sympathetic. So they're doing all of these things to make you worried for these two, to make you feel for Henry, to make you feel for Sam. And it's all just really great stuff. And they spend the whole episode working on that to build up to the ending. And you know, this episode also does a great job, and this works to make the ending more impactful. The episode does a great job of filling in backstory, which continues to build on the character relationship as well. For example, in this episode, we see how the attic that Kathleen discovered in a previous episode, we see how it came to look the way it looked when Kathleen saw it. We saw how Henry and Sam ended up there. We understand why they left. And here's the thing. I didn't necessarily need that info. Like, you know, when Kathleen arrives there, we see the attic, we see the empty cans, we see the drawings on, like, we can glean that Henry and Sam were there. That informed us that at least one of them was a kid, which is like, oh shit, one of them's a kid? Whoa, okay, why does she want to kill these two so bad? But like, you know, we see that. I didn't need that. You know, I understood that they were there, they left, whatever the case may be. I didn't understand that. I didn't need that. But it served two purposes. It filled in the backstory so that now I do know, and it allowed the show to work on the relationship building between Henry and Sam. You know, all the stuff about, you know, how Henry's mindset was, needing to be brave, being scared, all that kind of shit. It allowed that time to showcase their relationship, and allowed the show to show us the kind of dynamic that they had to kind of like build that relationship up for what happens at the end. And then also, like I said, it fills in the backstory. And now I'm like, okay, now I can see how the attic ended up that way. And those scenes show me the true nature of their relationship and who they are versus who Kathleen this whole time has made them out to be, and who Kathleen herself. No, I can't say who Kathleen herself believes to be, because Kathleen reveals that she understood everything at the end. She just didn't give a fuck. But now they're not just the Henry and Sam that Kathleen has been referring to, these ominous figures that have something to do with her brother's death. And now we're just like, who are these Henry and Sam guys? And of course we can understand why she would hate somebody who had a hand in her brother's death. But now they're two brothers on their own who are kids, who are scared, who are trying to stay alive, and we can relate to that, and we can understand that. We're gonna be scared for them too, and it's just so good. And I mentioned earlier how effective I think it was to have Sam be deaf, but then they made Henry sympathetic as well, because it was already clear his brother was everything to him, and we could sympathize with a kid as young as Henry. Like I said, he looks 17, 18, having to be strong for his brother, but by this point, I'm totally into these two. And it made me go, why the fuck does Kathleen hate them so much? Then we find out why, and it's because the only time that Henry ever did anything bad, he does what happens with Kathleen's brother, who happened to be the leader of the resistance, who he respected tremendously, and he did all this to get medicine to treat Sam's leukemia. So now he's not only deaf, he also has leukemia. Like, he's more sympathetic. And then we find out that the thing that Henry is hated for, it was like noble. It's like, like how they talk about, stealing bread to feed your starving family. Like, okay, fuck stealing the bread. Fuck stealing. My family's gonna die. And it's the same thing. It's like, fuck Kathleen's brother. But, like, I need to protect Sam. But it wasn't fuck Kathleen's brother. Henry's such a good guy. He respected, he admired, he cherished Kathleen's brother. And it's like, all of this is just like done. And you're like so sympathetic for Henry now. And they're just piling on all these reasons for you to be like, oh my God, they're setting me up. Like, they're setting me up for tremendous heartache. Like, something's gonna happen. You know it because they've done such a great job of making you care so much about these two characters. And then, as if it wasn't enough, giving a deaf kid leukemia in order to make him sympathetic, they have him then get infected. And then you get Ellie frantically trying to use her own blood to save him. It's like, oh my God, this is so sad. And then we get to the end, and he's sitting on the edge of the bed, and like, as soon as the scene opened, he's sitting on the edge of the bed. I'm like, oh, fuck. And then what's worse is, like, you don't even have time to fully wrap your head around what they might do. I see him sitting on the bed. I'm like, shit, it didn't work. He's fucking infected. I didn't think it was gonna work anyway, but he's fucking infected. Your brain then immediately goes to, okay, they're going to have to realize that he's infected. They're going to have to realize that they have no choice but to essentially, they're going to have to take him out. They're going to have to deal with, they're going to have to They're going to have to, they're going to have to deal, like, they're going to have to contend with that decision. Like, they're going to have to figure, like, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? Do we want to do this? Like, that uncomfortable conversation. All of those things are coming into my mind, that where this is like a drawn out situation. And then the events just happen so fast, and you don't even really have time to wrap your head around it before Sam's gone, Henry's gone, and the actor that played Henry in that scene, my God, what incredible direction that guy must have got. He could not have played that better. And I think this is one of those things where these are examples where I don't think you get that out of this actor without him having some really good direction. Like, you need to have fucking Denzel Washington or some shit where you could be like, here, Denzel, here's the script, and then you get that out of Denzel. No, you can't. You need to. You're not gonna just get that out of this kid. This kid had needed that direction, and I think he was given it, and I think it worked. He was absolutely fucking incredible, and I wish whoever directed this episode had given Alexandra Daddario some direction in Mayfair Witches. But I'm sorry, I didn't want to be mean, but it just flowed right out. So another thing this episode did good. I don't want to spend too much time. That was the bulk of what I want to talk about, but they tied up loose ends, and they show attention to detail, which you guys know I love attention to detail. I said last week that my only issue with the episode was it was completely implausible to me that Henry and Sam would find Joel and Ellie on the 33rd floor of a 45-floor random fucking building in downtown Kansas City. I didn't even really need that explanation, but I just wanted to say, I noticed this. I don't think that's plausible, but I trust this show to possibly explain that. And sure enough, This show continues to prove it's being done by the best of the best, as they not only explain that, but they do it while also kind of like converging the two storylines. Like, we don't even understand that what we were seeing with Henry and Sam was running concurrently with what we were seeing with Joel and Ellie in the previous week. We don't even understand that until the two scenes converge. The scene where Joel and Ellie crash into the building, until that happens from the Henry and Sam perspective, we don't even understand. And now we come to understand, like, holy shit, this was going on at the same time as what was going on with with Joel and Ellie. And then you later come to realize, like, oh shit, they were following them the whole time. And it's just brilliant. Like, it's brilliant. Like, they think of everything, they cover everything, so that a piece of shit like me who's nitpicking has to come on the next week and be like, I thought I had them and they got me. Like, I thought I caught a fuck up, and they were like, nope, you didn't. And then lastly, perfectly executed suspense. This show is great with fake outs. It takes our expectations for when something crazy is going to happen and subverts them. Henry lays out what has to be the worst plan ever in this episode. He's talking about Fedra burying the infected underground, and they're going to take tunnels, which I don't know if you guys know this or not, but tunnels, they also happen to be underground. They're going to take tunnels to get out of the city. Now, for one, learning that that Fedra buried the infected underground reminds you of that fucking breathing hole that Kathleen and her number 2 saw. I think that was last week. Which, once Henry lays out that the infected were put underground, it then made me think about that breathing hole, and then it made me think, what the fuck did Henry and Sam do that the breathing hole of the infected buried underground was the number 2 priority for Kathleen behind catching Henry and Sam? What did they do? So now I'm thinking, like, in this episode, are they going to explain to me what Henry and Sam did? Because, like, they're really making Henry and Sam so sympathetic, and I'm so into these two. Like, I'm loving these two characters. Why does she hate them so much? Are they going to tell me? And they're just finding new ways to, like, just get me more and more invested. But then they go through the whole tunnel situation. I'm sitting there nervous, thinking, like, oh, what's going to happen? And they get out and nothing happened. Like, they made it through the tunnel. I'm like, this whole time, any other show would have had something happen in that tunnel. And they had this whole build up. I'm thinking, like, oh my goodness, they're going underground through tunnels. They just told us that they buried the infected underground. This shit is about to be crazy. And they come out the tunnel safe. I'm like, y'all keep fucking with me. Like, what is going on? And they subvert that expectation to then later have the big attack, which I'm sure a lot of fans were waiting on, but it was perfectly executed because they set it up so well. And, like, I don't know about you guys, but as soon as that truck started to dip into that ground, I said, oh shit, they finna come out the ground. And I was so ready for it. And it was so good. Like, we're treated to this great action scene that still takes plausibility into account, right? Because again, I feel like the people who create this show, like of course this isn't the case, but it's almost like they watch my channel, like, we know all the shit this motherfucker's gonna nitpick about. Let's make sure we cover everything. And I was sitting there during this action scene, seeing all of these infected come out of the ground, and I'm like, okay, how are they gonna get out of this? But 2, how are they gonna essentially kill off Kathleen's people while still allowing the kids to escape? Because Joel is, off dealing with that, the sniper guy that was dealing with them. And even then, I'm just like, I doubted them. I was like, they're not gonna, like, I feel like I'm not gonna buy how they're gonna escape this situation. And they have Joel providing cover for them while they're running from above, which I'm like, okay, yep, that works. And then with the whole thing about Sam being bit, we revealed that essentially they didn't get out of it scot-free. Sam did get bit. He did turn. They did end up having to die. But it was like, in that moment, I was like, I don't know how they're gonna get out of this. They get out of it in a very plausible way with Joel's cover from above, and then you find out, like, they didn't technically get out of it anyway. And it's like, it's realistic. They thought of everything. I can't sit here and nitpick and be like, I don't know what you thought you were doing, but I don't buy this. It was just so good, man. They think of everything. They cover everything. They maximize emotional response. They build up what they need to build up in order to elicit that response. It's perfect, man. And then, after that excited scene, given everything that's happened up to that point, once Sam turns and Henry has to kill himself, and like I said, kudos to the actor in that scene, we're emotionally wrecked. We're done. Like, oh my God, this is this. Fuck, man. I knew it was gonna happen. Like when Sam showed that he was bit, I was like, oh my goodness. And I turned to my wife, I'm like, yeah, it's gonna suck when they fucking kill him. But I believe that would happen. But I'm thinking like it's gonna be a thing where like they're gonna do it like in the next episode or whatever. I didn't think it was gonna happen within the next 14 seconds. And then they have the goddamn nerve to have Ellie write "I'm sorry" on Sam's little drawing pad, which I had one of those pads growing up. The little thing where you write on it, you lift the page up and it erases. I had one of those, and they even set that up. Like you could have kept that scene out. We were all, the whole audience, all however many million people were watching this episode. We were all emotionally done already. We didn't need the fucking "I'm sorry" thing. They throw that on as a kick in the balls while we're already crying emotionally, or literally if you're somebody who's crying watching it. And they even set that up by the constant showing of the pad in the first place. So with Ellie and Sam interacting with each other, bonding over the pad, bonding over the comic book. So when she when she feels that responsibility and needs to apologize, it's like, you already fucked me up emotionally enough. Now you're gonna do this too, which I didn't even realize how well they were building up to that earned emotional response. It was like it happened, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, thinking about Sam and Ellie, the relationship they had leading up to that, the comic book, the drawing pad, like all this kind of stuff, the attempt at saving them, like the idea of Joel and Ellie kind of being like a mirror image of Henry and Sam. You know, this idea of the protector over the younger one, and it's like they just did everything so well. It was like it was like all I'm left to do is file this episode under like masterclass on effectively eliciting an emotional response, and it was just perfect. And like I said, that scene with the "I'm sorry" was the final dagger in a perfectly executed episode that was just magnificent. Like, that's how you do emotional response. That is how you do suspense. Like, they did everything perfectly. And this is the 5th fucking episode, man. Like how much more does this show have when you knock out 2 consecutive? The Bill and Frank was episode 3. So, well, episode 4 is incredible as well. But like when you're having like this caliber of television back to back to back early in your season, what are we gonna be in for the finale of this shit, man? Like think about how much they fucked us up in episode 5. What are we gonna get in episode 9? I don't know, but man, I am totally fucking in. This was a phenomenal episode. I don't think it's gonna get as much credit as the Bill and Frank episode because that one was romantic, and I think romance holds a little bit more weight with people than what we saw here. This was just sad, whereas they're like, you get the romantic aspect of it, and then it ended the way it ended, and you're just like, oh, but it kind of felt like the natural end for them anyway. Whereas like killing off kids is never gonna be like, oh, like, so that's not gonna be that. It's a different kind of emotion, but I just felt like all of the big moments that they went for in this episode were executed perfectly. They were set up perfectly, and they took big swings. They took multiple big swings. They hit grand slams on every single one of them, and it was flawless. It was a great episode. And then I'm gonna close with one note, just one quick thought that I thought was something I wanted to mention. Even given how much this episode emotionally kicked us in the balls, the scene where they were making fun of how Joel's natural speaking voice sounded untrustworthy, like that. Props to Pedro, because that was a great thing. Like, it was about his voice, but it worked because of his face. Watch that again. It worked because of his face. If he had done it with a different face, it wouldn't have worked as well. But shout out to Pedro. That scene was hilarious. So I will see you guys. It was today's Saturday. I will see you guys next Monday for episode 6. So it'll be a little bit over a week. But until then, peace.